today I want to talk about one of the biggest problems that I find about World of Tanks console right now, and this is a video that is covering HE rounds, or at least the high alpha HE rounds that we've been seeing just plastered all over the game, and it's really becoming a super annoying problem for whether you play light tanks, mediums, heavies, or even tank destroyers that aren't just derp guns. And it really does frustrate me whenever I'm playing the game, whether that be, you know, when I'm doing really well, or whether, you know, sometimes it ends up that you actually get penned by one of these guys. Sometimes it's just luck of the draw. Now, I've got a video clip that's playing in the background where we're using the Rogel Dawn. This is one of the new Warhammer vehicles that was released. It's a pretty solid vehicle and should be very good at being able to use a position which is primarily for heavy vehicles, you know, being able to essentially come around a corner, use your armor, angle, and use it to the utmost ability. But you're going to see why it's kind of pointless now within the game. The first one is we go for a shot on the FE 4005. Now you can see I'm angling here to try and get a decent kind of option to basically bounce around. Now with an FE 4005, we all know it's been in the game, it's a Hesh round vehicle, but there you go, first round goes into my track and it does 400 damage. It hits my track and does 400 damage from essentially not aiming at all and just simply finding any part of my armor and being able to do 400 damage. Now it's not just the FE in this game, we've got a Centurion AVRE, we've also got ourselves a Centauro who is over angling, or at least overexposing himself, and then we low roll him. But of course with an FE 4005 the whole point of it is that it's a big gun. It should have a negative, you know, if you miss you take quite a bit of damage, but we get hit in our track again for 400 damage, literally in the track. And remember that this isn't exclusive to just the FE 4005, and in fact it could be, you know, okay if it's only an FE 4005 or the FE 215B183. They've been in the game for a long time, you kind of understand that, yeah, you're going to get hit and yeah, you're going to take damage if they hit you, and there you go. Another 400 damage hit from hitting me at a ridiculous angle where any other round would have just bounced right off and done no damage. But I guess with these HE cannons you basically don't have to aim. And so we've lost pretty much the entirety of our hit points to HE splash damage. And oh look, it's an AVRE. Is he going to hit me? No, he's not. But he does hit Ricky. And so he's at the back behind me. And we're both playing the Rogel Dawn. We're just trying to experiment with the tank, try out this heavy tank in the way that it's supposed to be played on a heavy tank corner where you can hopefully deal a decent chunk of damage. But unfortunately, given the fact that there are so many of these HE tanks, it just becomes a real problem to do anything that isn't just taking damage every time you poke. And things like the AVRE and even things like the Ruthless, we've got tons of high alpha damage tanks that can essentially just fire HE rounds at you. And even if they're not tanks that are derped cannons, things like the Turan, all of these vehicles with such a high alpha damage can all deal at least 200, 300, sometimes even 400, and there you go, we get hit in the direct track and we still lose a crew member alongside actually taking a ton of damage as well. So you can see what my problem is when you look at things like this. And here you go, the typical AVRE driver almost flipping himself, going after the YOLO shot on Ricky here, and unfortunately Ricky's taken out. But this is the problem. It makes for the less experienced players the opportunity to just go in and do things that they probably shouldn't do. And of course then you low roll the guy that's just YOLO'd you. And then we get taken out by the FE, who obviously we're on being such on a low amount of hit points. He doesn't have to aim, he's got HE, he's going to finish me off. That is a common case. But because there are so many, it's so infuriating to play anything that isn't just a heavy tank, because at the end of the day, anyone with even a minute amount of a brain capacity can essentially hit you for 300, 400 damage. And it's just annoying. And hopefully Wargaming will come around with some form of HE changes whereby you can't just splash people for 400, 500 damage. This would make the AVRE certainly a vehicle that is less good, and obviously when you've got vehicles that are like that you can struggle to pen, but they're going to hit you for 400 every single time. They've got these minute weak points that are just a pain, and even things like the Turan are a problem as well, because not only can you get hit by the HE, but you get hit by the actual rounds themselves. And with the changes of the Guerrilla 15, I'm pretty sure you guys know what the high alpha TD meta is like right now, and it only seems to be getting worse with every introduction of another high alpha TD. And then you have the introduction of things like the high alpha autoloaders that have the ability to deal 2,500 damage. You know, back in the day it was only a couple of vehicles that would have the ability to even do over 1,500, things like the AMX 50B, the T57 Heavy. But over time, Wargaming have just increased the amount of tanks that can deal these huge amounts of damage numbers that make playing anything that isn't just a tank with stupidly high alpha very annoying to play. And it's not even like you can't have good results, it's just that every time you attempt to try and do better, or every time that you try and do your best, you get whacked for a ton of damage, and there's nothing you can really do about it if someone else decides that, you know what, screw it, I'm going to have a terrible game by just coming out and YOLOing you, and half your hit points are gone, or even more. And if you're a lower tier vehicle, probably 75% of your hit points are gone, if not all of them, when something like an AVRE pens you or an FE pens you, and it creates this gameplay that is not fun for anyone else that isn't in the high alpha tank. And I guess maybe this is a form of Wargaming's way of trying to get people to buy the high alpha tanks, or force their way into getting a vehicle that can deal with things like this, but it really detracts from the whole game. The whole point is that you should be able to at least play any vehicle and outplay people, when often you can just get YOLO'd. And yes, YOLO happens on any game, and sometimes it can be annoying, and often it will not work for the person that does YOLO. But when you give them a 1,000, 1,200, 1,400 damage, they're going to take away a ton of your hit points, probably get taken out in the process, but it's completely ruined your game. This was my biggest problem with artillery. Being able to one-shot you from back in the base was just no fun at all. I'm pretty sure everyone can definitely, at least, I guess, feel that opinion is somewhat valid, that being hit from the base is not particularly very fun for the person you're hitting. Even when you're in an artillery piece, one-shotting someone from the back is not fun. And so, yeah, it ends up with this case of you feel helpless against a lot of the tanks that you'll be playing against. And this is one of the things that I hated about artillery, and I hate right now about the state of some of these tank destroyers in the game. And hopefully we'll see at least some changes to make this better, or make it feel less annoying to try and play any of these tanks. It really does infuriate me, as I'm sure it infuriates you. And even if you play these vehicles, you know how annoying it is when you're on the receiving end, because at the end of the day, even the Turans get hit for 1,400 sometimes, and often this will be from things like the AVRE, and you can't easily pen them. Yes, you can pen them and take them out, but that is the case for any tank in the game. But it just dumbs down the whole experience of the game, of which is not particularly that complicated as it is right now, with all of the accuracy changes and all of the improvements to accuracy that we've seen over the last 4 years or so. Yeah, it feels very, very problematic with the gameplay itself right now. And I'm interested to see whether you guys share this opinion. Are you finding the amount of high alpha tanks just super annoying? Are you finding that getting hit by HE rounds for at least 400 damage, regardless of where they hit you, super annoying? It's the same for any heavy, super heavy vehicle. It's why you don't see tanks like the MAUs, the E100, the Type 5s being able to do what they used to be able to do, which is block rounds. It's because they take damage every time they poke, whether they're doing everything correct or whether they're not doing everything correct. And even when they are doing everything correct, because the accuracy is so outstandingly good right now within console, you'll find that people are able to pinpoint your weak points, which, yes, I agree that you should be able to hit weak points when you aim for them, but because the accuracy is so good, there's not really any opportunity for people to get unlucky and maybe it actually bounces. And so 90% of the time, even in your super heavy vehicles, if someone has a clue as to what they're doing, they're going to pen you, and most likely you're going to probably miss, or maybe you'll pen them back. But yeah, when you've got such high alpha and you're pulling out against things that are like the Turan, you either A, don't pull out at all, which means you don't get any damage and you have to move somewhere else, which in a super heavy is basically just you want to peel your eyes out because you can't move anywhere else on the map because you're so slow, or you risk it and hope that they do end up bouncing, or that they don't know what they're doing, or that, you know, maybe they get unlucky and it bounces and maybe it hits the track or something like that. But yeah, I mean, when you're relying on RNG to save you, it's never a good sign. So that is why I have been just neglecting any of the super heavies really in the game, bar things that just have flat out incredible armor, things like the IS-7, where even if they are firing their premium rounds in a super high alpha tank, that they're not going to be able to pen you for 1,000 or whatever it might be, but in fact they're going to bounce, or maybe they only deal 200 damage by their splash damage on your turret. But even then, if they catch a glimpse of the actual hull armor, you're going to get penned. And the more and more that Wargaming introduce tanks like this, the more and more toxic the gameplay is going to be, the worse the gameplay is going to be, and the amount of uses that a super heavy has in the game will become even less than it already is, which is why I would advocate for having a worse accuracy when you're actually auto-aiming someone, because at the end of the day, the initial intent with the mechanic was so that light tanks would be able to circle heavy tanks during the game, to be able to actually reliably be able, when they're so close, to hit people. But guess what now happens? Everyone in their TD is auto-aiming you across the map and basically dealing a ton of damage to you with their super high penetration and their super high alpha by flicking onto you. And even when you are fully aiming, because of the nature of actually fully aiming on the map, it takes a lot longer than when you just hold RB for half a second and then suddenly it's locked onto the vehicle. And yes, you may bounce if you auto-aim everything, but it still hits a lot of the time, because the actual disparity between when your shot goes in the center of the circle versus when it reaches the outer circle, for those of you that don't know, is actually more likely to hit into the center than it is to the far extremes. And it's actually this which causes the RNG, although being 25 plus 25 minus 25% on your damage and your penetration, that actually you're more likely to hit in the center than you are to hit on the extremities, and actually it's exponential, so that you're actually more likely to hit near the center of the circle, and it gets even less likely as you go further out towards the extremities. So it can still happen, but it's extremely less likely as you move through. So this is one thing that has been a real problem, and in fact when I think of anything that isn't a light tank, you probably should end up with an accuracy that just gives you essentially a random chance to hit anywhere within the circle. I feel like this would help out the game in terms of the game length, because no one likes playing games that are literally 3 minutes long where one team just steamrolls the other because they've got a Turan or a Malo, if you play Cold War, rolling through one flank auto-aiming. Or B is also to actually decrease the accuracy itself, not make it incredibly terrible, but just make it so that when someone actually auto-aims you, they have to be looking at you, because I can look halfway across the screen at something like a rock, for example, and still be able to flick onto you using my RB button. It should be that you have to look at the vehicle before you can even auto-aim. This would be a big save for a lot of tanks, including the super heavies. It would make them actually usable and less just prone to being flicked on by tanks halfway across the map. This is one of the things that I feel would be a big benefit. But I wanted to talk about it because at the end of the day, I see your comments, you guys getting annoyed with it, and I share that same opinion. I am frustrated as hell seeing the auto-aim and the actual accuracy of some of these tanks, including some of the derp tanks like the FV4005 having 0.3 accuracy. Yeah, 0.3 accuracy on an absolutely biggest gun that's supposed to be a derp cannon, and it just isn't. And yeah, it's not fun at all, and it really does cause some big problems with how the game plays and how it generally feels to be playing a game like this. So hopefully this at least gives you my opinion, my unfiltered opinion, and my genuine proposals that Wargaming should at least think about when it comes to this game. But hopefully you understand where I'm coming from. It's not supposed to be a super well thought out, but I wanted to at least give you an indication as to my thoughts on some of these things, and of course the AVREs and all of these tanks that cause the big problems within the game and probably make your game just that little bit worse. And with every introduction of these sorts of tanks, it makes it just that much more worse. Of course, over time it's going to make it even worse and worse and worse, and hopefully that isn't the case, and Wargaming buckle up their ideas, make some changes to HE, make some changes to how auto aim actually works in the game so that people actually aim, because at the end of the day it's just not possible to fire on the move with some of the World War II tanks hitting targets literally halfway across the map, if not longer away from that some of the map. So yeah, that was my kind of rant for today. And yeah, I thought it was something I wanted to share, and hopefully you guys can understand where I'm coming from. And if you did and you want to support me, then liking this video is a massive help. And we'll get back to our regular scheduled programming where we take a look at some of the buffed vehicles that were buffed during the latest season update, and the latest update which saw a whole huge range of buffs that I'm really excited to actually look at, and hopefully we don't get taken out by these derp cannons in those games. So I'll see you there. Have a great rest of the day and a great weekend if I don't see you again, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.